Hi, I'm Dante,
And I am Tommy.
and you're listening to Twigging Onto Twig, a podcast where we talk about Wildbow's most nauseating web serial, Twig.
In today's episode, we are discussing the fact that it's been a million years. We're also discussing Stitch in Time 4.5 and Stitch in Time 4.6.
It has been a million years, hasn't it? I barely remember what's happened in this arc
I
so
know
far.
I had to go back and reread, and a lot of that is my fault. A lot of random, both trips and health things. Last time we meant to record, we had scheduled it, and about 2-3 hours before, I sent you a picture of the emergency room I was in.
Yeah,
Waiting.
you were in the hospital for 14 hours or something?
I was waiting in the ER for somewhere like 14, 15 hours.
It's wild.
Yep. Not as bad. I was talking to some older couple who was next to me in the ER waiting, and they waited over 24 hours, I guess because lower triage, lower priority. But those poor people had the woman had sprained her ankle on the way out of the house to the airport for a cruise around France. And instead of that, they got to spend 24 hours in the hospital.
Heartbreaking.
It's awful. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Like, I kind of feel like I would have, I mean, it's easy to say, but I would have suffered through a sprained ankle, gone to the airport, and went to, like, an emergency clinic in France or something.
Sure. How are you feeling now?
Oh, I mean, that was a while back. I feel fine now.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yep.
So now we're getting back into it, and
Yep.
we'll
Momentum.
see if we can pick up where we left off.
Build momentum and go for it.
Yeah. So the audiobook descriptions for these chapters. 4.5. This chapter contains a subtle knife pun. You'll have to be pretty sharp to catch it. Did you catch it?
I did not. Did you?
I did not either. We will parry more attention next time. That was a subtle knife pun.
Parry?
Will Parry is a character from The Subtle Knife.
Oh, yes, it is. Sorry, I my brain went parry as in fencing, and I was like, I guess a sword is a big knife.
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose his name is already a knife pun, so...
Oh, you're right, and he has the subtle knife. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just a revelation there.
Layers and layers of subtle knife puns. And we still don't know what the knife pun in the chapter was. It's probably just Mary doing something like she usually does.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And 4.6. You may think I pronounced a name incorrectly in this chapter. I did not. Do you want to guess which character may have been mispronounced?
I'm assuming she pronounced Benoit as Bennett or something.
It was Benoit. You're right.
Okay.
But it wasn't incorrectly because his name comes up twice. And the first time, when the other guy talks to him, calls him Benoit, and then Sai in his internal narrative calls him Benoit.
So presumably, okay.
So, yes. It sounds like she's pronouncing it incorrectly, but I believe her when she says that it's Sai's fault and he's just being a dick.
Probably. Yep, so also in terms of, I don't know if really this counts as housekeeping, more of an announcement or anything. If you are getting your Wildbow news from us, you might remember that in the last episode we announced the start of Claw. Well, that's over.
Did started in our last episode?
I'm pretty sure. It could have been further back.
Wildbow has released an entire web serial between our two episodes.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. So Seek is out, or started, not out, started. And to be honest, it's clicked for me much more than Claw did. I didn't end up reading much of Claw. Did not connect as much, but Seek I'm enjoying so far very much.
Seek is really good. Like, as is usual for Wildbow, it's great writing, but also just the idea of it and the vibe of it and just the setting he paints.
Well, you say the vibe of it, but I find it really interesting how it's been 3 chapters at the time of this recording in presumably 3 different time periods, and the vibe of each is very different. The writing feels very different.
But the vibe of each is really good.
Yes, I'm not arguing that point. Just they are different.
To be honest,
vibes.
You talk about clicking. The first of the 3 chapters didn't really click with me at first, and I had to give it a few tries. I think it was just like I misunderstood a couple of things and was a little bit confused. And
are you reading it audiobook or not
there
audiobook,
isn't an
but like text to
audiobook.
speech?
There isn't an audiobook. I tried to do it text to speech, and I found that it was just too confusing. It
Okay.
didn't convey enough information about what was going on. So I went back and read it like properly in quotes. And that when I did that, I was able to get into it. And then like the second and third chapters, I was just like, the first one was a little bit confusing for me at first, but like the next two were just like amazing. Like I just want so much more of it.
Have you? Well, I mean, we're not doing a Seek podcast, much as I regret not wanting.
Somebody
I have
better
things,
do a Seek podcast.
I have things I want to talk about, especially about the second chapter and like essentially an iPod child or an iPad child from birth.
Do we want to do like a back to Seek section
Seeking
at the end?
out Seek. We could
Let's
real
do
quick. Okay, let's do it. We don't have any notes for that, so we're going to wing it. And I was going to ask you, have you read Sign?
I have. I read it a couple days ago.
Cool. Okay, so we can talk about that. Because I think we actually had a conversation about Sign at the brewery last week, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Because you had said that it was in the same universe, and I was like, does that mean it's canon? And you were like, I don't know. And anyway, I've read it just in case.
Yeah.
I want to be on the same page as the rest of the fandom if they've read it.
If Genevieve Frey shows up in Twig, perhaps, I don't remember the character in Sign. Yeah. Cool.
If Genevieve Frey shows up in Seek,
we've got problems.
Another thing that I want to mention is, well, you mentioned that Claw is over, and Clawful Evil, Probable Claws, our sister podcast, is also coming to a close because of it. And
are we sister podcasts? Is that a thing?
I think we're sister podcasts. We're the two ongoing Wildbow podcasts, and we're both squatting in the Doof Discord. So
okay, sure, I'll take it.
I was
going to say, isn't Pale in Comparison still ongoing?
No, because they just released their very final episode. Like last weekend?
Yeah, something like that.
So yeah, Pale in Comparison is over. Claw is over. Clawful Evil Probable Claws is coming to an end, but their next episode that will probably have been released by the time we release this episode has a very special guest in it. Me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
that's exciting.
If you want to hear me talking Claw with our friends on the Clawful Evil podcast, go check them out if you're not listening to them already.
And you have to declare that we are sister podcasts. Because then if it's said on both podcasts...
I'm pretty sure they have referred to us as a sister podcast already.
Oh, well, I haven't listened to it because I haven't read Claw, so I wouldn't know.
Terrible. You're missing out. That's all I'm
sure
saying.
I am. I know, it just... Yeah, Claw felt too viscerally real to me in a way that none of the other Wildbow works have, and it was hard to read.
Sure. I get it.
I'm sure I'll get to it eventually, but...
Okay, I just want to say... You found Claw a little bit too visceral for you, and you're okay with continuing with Twig?
No, but it's the
to make sure, like we're okay.
Yes. No, it's the fact. Sorry, I'm trying to articulate this thought, and I've tried to articulate this thought for it. Just it feels real in a way that there isn't the remove of like the suspension of disbelief that all these other works.
Mm-hmm. It certainly is the most realistic of his works.
Yeah,
and
I mean. As a parent, that especially, I mean, ever since my son's been born, I've noticed that I found myself much more sensitive to depictions in fiction of children or babies being hurt or whatever.
Sure.
And there's a lot of that in Claw. And, I mean, spoilers, I guess, for Claw, but at least it felt very hard to get past in a way.
Sure. Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah, and
that's valid. No, not everything is for everyone. So
nope.
I'll give you a hard time for not reading Claw, but really, like, you're allowed to skip over a book every once in a while.
For sure.
Shall we? get into this. So the
Yeah.
only general thoughts I had was that compared to the last episode, so last episode we were talking about that big conversation that Genevieve had with Sai, this first
Yeah.
confrontation,
Hmm.
and it was like just this one little or like a very small number of things happening, but they were big momentous things.
It felt like a big climactic
Mm-hmm.
encounter for like in a movie or something. The first arc of the introducing the villain, as it were, of this penny novel, this dime store novel.
Mm-hmm.
And now she's, we know who she is. She knows who our protagonists are, and the protagonists know who she is. And afterwards, it's going to be the chess game here. But and these two chapters to me, as you kind of said in the notes here, it feels like, yeah, like the previous bit was the climax, and now we have a downward
Mm-hmm.
slope, a breath out of letting things settle, letting things rest, moving into position for
Mm-hmm.
what's coming next. We're getting into we're setting up the board, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like there's still a lot of things that happen, but there are a lot of little things
Yeah,
rather than
exactly.
big momentous things. So let's do our plot recap.
Sure. So previously on Twig, Genevieve lured Sylvester into a secluded location and proceeded to get to know him. She also offered to have the Lambs join her in her fight against the Academy, saying that she could provide them with all the support that the Academy provides in terms of their bio-horror
Mm-hmm.
needs. Sai refuses, and in the end, Genevieve drugs him and leaves him to recover. You put in a nearby cafe in your summary, but I'm pretty sure it's against the wall outside a nearby cafe,
Sure.
wrapped in her coat.
I may have misremembered. It was a long time ago.
It was.
In Stitch in Time 4.5, the Lambs catch up with Sai, who outlines his conversation with Genevieve. And he realizes that Genevieve is trying to distract them from something she must have set in motion before they even got here. They form a plan to try and track her down by checking coat stores, since she left her coat with Sai and will need to buy a new one. And we also hear a revelation from Gordon that if he was in Sai's place, he would have accepted Genevieve's offer.
In Stitch in Time 4.6, Sai realizes that Genevieve must be staying in a place with access to a good lab. Unfortunately, there are a lot of such places in Kensford. The Lambs find a coat shop and interrogate the shopkeepers. Sai tries to trick the employees into giving them information. It does not work. Gordon tries to strong-arm the employees into giving them information. It doesn't work. Finally, they give up and just ask honestly and are given the information they need. Genevieve is at the local academy working as the tutor for a student named Lady Claire.
Yeah. I thought that whole interrogation was just like
Yeah.
a shit show. They just kept throwing stuff at the wall, nothing working, and at the end they're just like, look, listen, we're just trying to find information to help people.
Well, and it's just, I find it interesting because we had a very similar but also very different interaction at the beginning of this arc when they're getting into the post office. And they're just a seamless team getting everything they need and in and out instantly.
Mm-hmm.
And here is just, I don't know, let's throw things and something will maybe work
Yeah.
eventually.
I did really notice that. Like the post office, especially as you said, it was just clockwork.
Yeah.
This was the opposite of clockwork. This was just like nothing. Sai is just getting increasingly frustrated. Nothing's working. He's trying to trick them. He's trying to strong arm them, threaten them, appeal to their better nature. Nothing.
It's just nothing. It just does not click.
And you know what? They're in the right for not clicking because they're just like, maybe we should go to the authorities if what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
And that
Like, can we call the cops about
is the
this?
right call. But yeah, he does get the information he needs in the end. And this lady Claire, I don't know, maybe she'll be a interesting character, or maybe she'll just be a throwaway name. But
I bet she doesn't exist, and she is the Genevieve has set up her. I've forgotten the Stitch's name. Alice, right?
Wendy.
Wendy. I don't know where Alice came from. Wendy, as a student in the academy, as a place for her to hide. Her being Genevieve.
Alice and Wendy are both protagonists of 1800s children's novels.
I could have sworn it was Alice. I don't know why.
I wanted to talk some more about Genevieve's intentions. Because
Sure.
last time there was a lot of talk about that. That was the whole kind of Sai's whole
Mm-hmm.
angle in his discussion with Genevieve was to try and figure out what she wants, what she's trying. And he
Yep.
came away convinced that Genevieve was mostly interested in curiosity. Like, who are these Lansbridge
Yeah.
kids? What are they up to? But he learns a lot more about her in retrospect, which I thought was interesting. I wonder
Well,
if Sai's deductive skills are better in retrospect generally.
I there's a part of me when I was reading this that wonders whether Sai is right here. In that
And thinking
I
that she's
that there's more
that there's a
to it.
distraction.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a distraction involved. There's stuff, but I feel I mean I don't know, but there was a part of me that was thinking that Sai potentially is overthinking this and rationalizing what he qualifies as a loss. It's like, oh, there has to be more going on than her just finding out or having information, wanting information. Just her curiosity that she has to have a bigger plan on the go. A, because she has the Wyvern formula, and therefore it has to be these big things, these big
Yeah.
plans going on, because that's how I think.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I lost, and there has to be a reason that I lost, rather than, oh, she was just a better conversationalist than I was.
Yes.
So yeah, like I don't know that I necessarily believe Sai's thought process here.
Okay.
I mean,
So
clearly the rest of the lambs do, which
yeah. So do you think that Genevieve doesn't have a bigger plan at play, or do you just think that Sai is jumping to conclusions and just being right out of luck?
I think the latter.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because certainly I think Genevieve is up. I think that Genevieve does give away enough to think that she is up to more than she lets on.
Sure, her
Like
whole like
all
join
the
me
stuff.
and together we'll rule the galaxy as Wyvern and Wyvern.
Yeah.
But
Well, honestly, I think like the stuff he talks about with Lillian about how much effort it would take to stay on top of like Wendy and
yeah,
Warren and keep them maintained shows that she is operating at a higher level than she lets on.
yes. She's clearly not, well, as they say, she's clearly not hiding in a barn running away from the academy type of deal.
Mhm, mhm.
Um
Um,
but
but yeah, I
sorry,
definitely see where you're coming from for sure.
because I don't remember in her interlude, which was the last enemy, right?
Yes.
I do,
Well, it was Warren's POV, but
sure,
yes,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. But I at the end she sorry, I don't remember there being much of a hint of that. And I'll admit I didn't go back to reread it here, but I don't remember there being that many hints to a bigger thing. It was kind of like, okay, the whelps are here. We're going to make our stand here. I'm tired of running. Was what I'm remembering of
Okay.
that.
Okay. Yeah. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
I kind of think that this is just something that I that just occurred to me.
Mhm.
If Genevieve is operating similarly to Sai with her Wyvern enhanced strategic brain,
Mhm.
Sai schemes on the by the seat of his pants all the time.
That is true.
So Genevieve, I would imagine, is probably also scheming by the seat of her pants. And
Mhm.
so her big plan, if a big plan she has, is probably coming together as it happens rather than in
And adapting
advance.
and changing as it goes.
Hmm.
That's fair. She's setting up a bunch of potential things that she'll take advantage of if need be. Otherwise, they'll just fall by the wayside and not be necessary.
Yeah, just like how Wildbow writes these books.
Yep. Also, I have to say it's really cute to see your two kittens playing after a ball in the back.
I've got 6 of them back there.
I've only seen two, I think, and they are clearly kittens. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, they are adorable. They're probably 2 months old by now.
Oh.
Yeah, there's 5 kittens and their mom, and they are a menace. I think it's just a matter of time before they jump up here and start chewing on the cables.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might be able to hear the noise of them in the background too. I don't know, but
I haven't heard anything yet. But
they are very cute. I'll have to post photos or something.
Oh, there's the mom. Much more dignified.
She is very dignified. She's so sweet.
These are the Starbucks?
These are the Starbucks. Yeah, they're all named after Starbucks drinks. Mama's name is Macchiato. Hi, Mackie. She's really sweet.
And the rest are out. Anyway, so I think the big thing here is, despite his nausea, Sai thinks that Genevieve didn't actually swap the pills.
Yeah.
He's not super certain about it, but pretty certain.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point because it is like a gamble that they think it's important to make. And it's not even... Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was
going to say, it's not even so important that whether or not Genevieve swaps the pills or not. I think it's more important that the Lambs need to get a win or at least follow Genevieve more than they need to play it safe with their own well-being.
That's kind of how I read that also. Like, I feel like that percentage that Sai has in his mind is influenced at least in large part by, like you said, having to have the Lambs together and win. Mm-hmm. You know, it's
I think Sai is pretty explicit about that too, to be honest.
Sure, but like his mental calculus says what, like 80%, even if he says 95% out loud. Yeah. But yeah. I'd be willing to bet like it's actually closer to like 50-50, and he's
sure.
Because Sai lies to himself. We've established that.
Yes, yeah, but it does go pretty fast from like him deciding that it's possible that she didn't to them like committing to it, and now it's by now it's already too late.
Yeah, and that is despite his nausea and Lillian saying like, oh, she could have, like, yeah, I agree with Sai that it doesn't feel likely that Genevieve just messed with his stuff and is having him fall apart just based on the conversation, but I can see where Lillian's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. This next bit in our notes is about being a slave to the Academy, and I don't remember whether that was my notes or yours.
It's yours.
Is it mine? Okay.
It is yours, but I think it's an important thing to talk about because, like you said, or not like you said, but like it's...
this is something that I put in the notes twice. I like put it in the notes like 2 months ago, and then I put it again in my notes further down yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Under the Lambs, because it was just like the various Lambs having this reaction to Genevieve's idea of being free from the Academy. Should we talk about that here or later, do you think?
I think here is good for it.
Okay. So because last time we talked a lot about how Sai and Genevieve had differing views on what it means to be slave to the Academy and beholden to the Academy. And in this chapter, when Sai communicates that to the rest of the Lambs, we get the takes of several of the others. Mary talks about how she was under Mr. Percy, and now she's under the Academy, and it's better, but she is not free. And Helen, I think, has the most interesting take because she's under Ibbot. I'm going to pull the actual quote for Helen here.
Sure. But yeah, it's a pretty long quote there.
I love Professor Ibbot, Helen said. I don't like him. I wouldn't be happy if I never saw him again, but I wouldn't be sad either. I do what he says, and I'm good. I'm a work of art, and I do what he tells me, or I do what he tells me to, so I act like one too. If we walked away from the Academy, and I had someone else telling me what to be, it wouldn't be any different. Yeah. That's like a really interesting perspective from her, but like it still is the same reaction that Sai had, same reaction that Mary had.
Yeah, but interestingly, not at all the same reaction that Gordon had. And I thought it was very interesting that Gordon tells Sai, I would have taken it, but he tells Sai apart from the rest of the group. The rest of the group doesn't hear him say that, if I remember correctly.
That's right. It's kind of interesting that Gordon trusts that information to Sai.
Absolutely. And I think that shows us a lot about the dynamics of the group actually beyond what like they present to themselves and to each other, like the actual dynamics of the group. I can't, well, clearly because Gordon doesn't tell anybody else, but I can't necessarily picture Gordon telling Helen that, or Jamie, or,
Sure.
and I definitely wouldn't tell Mary or Lillian, because while they are lambs, they're still not the experiments that were the lambs.
I think we've seen this too in previous chapters within this arc of Gordon confiding in Sai about the state of the lambs. And like Sai, I think, I don't know. Sai kind of has a better pulse on what's going on, but at the same time, we've seen him not have a better idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
But I think that he really is kind of like Gordon's advisor or sort of second in command role when it comes to managing the interpersonal dynamics.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting seeing Sai as that sort of subsidiary leadership role, I guess.
Absolutely. I also do wonder whether there's an element of privilege here to Gordon, because I feel like, if I'm remembering correctly, each of the other lambs require more direct maintenance on some level, whereas I don't think we've ever heard of Gordon having to go in for upkeep or appointments and stuff, so it's a lot easier for him to imagine not being beholden to someone than the others.
Sure. I mean, certainly he has less of a team than Jamie, for example.
Yeah.
And less, I think, than Sai. They did mention a few chapters ago how many people Gordon had on his team. And it was like Gordon, Jamie, and Sai kind of had the teams working on them. And Helen just had the one guy.
But who is, Ibit.
Yeah, so that's kind of a separate thing. But I don't think we know how many people Mary is working with currently, and Lillian isn't working with anyone.
Well, no, but she's also beholden to the Academy in a very different way.
True.
And I think it's safe to assume that Mary, as a, in theory, outsider, does have... we see her mentality here. We see her thought process here. At least what she tells us is her thought process, or tells Sai. And for her, it would be just swapping out another Percy for another Academy for someone else. It's different approach. But yeah, for the Academy people itself, I guess it really comes down to, I don't think we've heard of Gordon having the same kind of appointments that Jamie or Sai have.
And you know what? Honestly, even if Gordon doesn't have the least amount of hands-on from the Academy, he still would have less than Sai or Jamie, and would have more of his perspective than Sai or Jamie, for sure.
Yeah. So, I think on some level, he's already kind of freer than they are.
I think he is probably freer.
Yeah. I do want to note that I think I predicted this at some point. I don't know if this changes my prediction at all.
Okay.
But I do think that this is setting the stage for either Lambs on the Run or Sai on the Run with the Lambs hunting him down arc.
It does seem to set that up as a possibility, especially now that we know that Gordon would be down for that.
Yeah.
And we know that Sai has done that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we've just merged our entire character discussion into the plot discussion.
I'm okay with that.
Which is
I'm
fine.
perfectly happy.
Do we want to just
do that?
do the rest of the character section here?
Yeah, sure. No problem.
I did think it was funny that Sylvester was just constantly being sarcastic.
Yeah.
And being silly.
Yeah, I mean, how much of that is the anesthetics wearing off?
Sure.
But yeah, I agree. I feel like he's trying to bring some levity to the group that is, as we discussed, sort of fracturing a little bit. And also coming to terms with the fact that he lost this encounter with Frey, and being kind of silly about it and silly interacting with the others lets him take his mind off it, and also distracts the others away from that.
Yeah.
If they're thinking about how, Sai's just being a sarcastic jerk, they're not thinking about how, Sai lost in this confrontation that he had with Genevieve. He specifically mentions Mary, doesn't he? Where he's like, she's the one who thinks the most about failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Mary being the most concerned about failure, I thought it was interesting how Mary and Lillian are contrasted in this chapter. Because, for example, when Sai says that he encountered Genevieve, Lillian is immediately like, oh no. And Mary's like, oh, yes. Because
Saying it a
Lillian
stab
is
at her
worried that,
versus, are you dying?
yes. But Mary just doesn't want failure. So she's like,
Yeah.
we're making progress. And that's all she cares
Finally.
about, which I thought was really interesting.
Sai, you are a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Mary's just completely mercenary. She's just like, well, lost the lambs, whatever.
Yeah.
What else do we have in here?
Well, I wanted to note that Gordon, when he's telling Sai about what they were doing while while Sai was talking to Frey, and also what he was doing what they were doing while he was letting the anesthetic wear off. Gordon specifically says, we tried to wait it out to the lure, the trap that they were in. We waited for you, which to me sounds like Gordon is blaming Sai for not being there, which I think is a little bit fair, but also like they all kind of split up to do things, and Sai is the one who found Genevieve. Like in theory, it could have happened that Gordon was the one who found her, or Jamie, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do feel like it's most likely that both Sai and Genevieve set it up so that it's the other Wyvern person who found that they interacted. But I think Genevieve would have been perfectly content, not happy, but content to interact with the others, or any of the others one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Gordon is kind of right to blame Sylvester a little bit. I mean, like, Sylvester came out of it drugged and nauseous and whatever.
Yeah.
So kind of, like, deserves a bit more sympathy. Although, as Gordon says, you're being sarcastic, so you can't be that badly off.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like, Sai just being like, oh, I'm just going to go in the opposite direction, not tell anyone, and then have a whole encounter while still don't even know he's gone.
Yeah.
I definitely feel for Gordon here. Also, absolutely. This comes right before Gordon is like trying to keep the peace between Lillian, Mary, and Sai, and just ends up slamming all three of them.
Yep. I did like that he smacks Sai, smacks Lillian, and then turns to smack Mary, and she like lowers her head. Quote, probably for the sake of fairness and to be a part of things.
And then he smacks Sai again, and then threatens to do it a third time. And honestly, I mean, he deserved it, didn't he?
Yeah.
he was being a butt there, trying to get under their skin.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's where you put the other, the notes about the slave thing. Yeah. I did want to note that it makes sense on some level that she hadn't, the quote, considerate as she'd been, she hadn't left me anything for the unsettled stomach. So despite wrapping him in her coat and like setting him up comfortably-ish against a wall, she let him nauseous. And I assume that's because she expects that whoever, Lillian, would want to do a full workup of Sai, make sure that like there was nothing else wrong, no traps left by her, and which gives her more time to fade into the background.
I kind of assumed that Genevieve just didn't think like that he would be nauseous. She just kind of thought, oh, he'll be cold, he'll be unconscious, and then just left and then didn't. But yeah, maybe she was thinking 2 steps ahead. It kind of makes sense for her.
Specifically, the nausea itself is Lillian specifically points out like, oh, this might be her triggering the like withdrawal from the pills reaction.
Yeah.
Like it is explicitly that problem that this could be doing. So yeah, it feels like Lillian is
if it was deliberate, it was a clever idea.
Yeah. And I think it's safe to assume that Genevieve, because she has the Wyvern thing, is planning that kind of thing. But I don't know.
Could be. Certainly it does give her more time to get away. She has made a clean getaway.
Clearly.
Until the very end, where...
I was going to say, yeah, until...
They finally... Oh, I forgot to mention that in the plot summary. But they do catch a glimpse
in Stitch in Time 4.6, they catch a glimpse of 3 women going into a building.
Dum dum dum. Oh wait, where's my dum 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 noise? Nope, that's not it. Stop. Here it is.
Perfect.
We're professionals.
You get paid for this?
Yeah, we're not even professionals literally, much less in quality.
Yeah.
We pay to do this.
That is true.
The only other thing I have really here about the lambs and the story is there's just this moment where they're ordering the cake and the pie, and they're all just like
Hmm.
saying, "I want this, I want that, I'll have this, please, I'll have that, please." And Jamie is like a little bit bashful about it, but it was just a funny moment. And it reminded me of the unexpected party in The Hobbit, where everyone's just being like,
It's like,
"I'll take
give me,
this."
give me all your things, and
Yeah.
yeah. Um,
But in this case, the lady just shuts it down. She's not running around. She's just like, "No, pick one thing, and I'll get you."
um, yeah. I have put in the notes here, but not to read too much into a funny little moment, but to read way too much into it.
I mean, what
Um,
are we here for if not to read too
yep.
much into things?
I thought it was interesting that they all have a choice. They all have a different opinion on which pastry, baked good, cake to have. And it feels like an analogy to the state of the group. Each of them like wanting a different thing and going for a different thing and different good, baked
Okay.
good. And then at the end, they're all forced to come together when pushed by an outside force. Cake Lady
Hmm.
or Genevieve Frey in the arc.
Yeah. And it does say it only takes a few seconds for them to all get on the same page.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
So
I like
maybe
that.
heavy-handed metaphor or too much heavy-handed reading into a metaphor. I don't know.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. Oh, one other thing important to note. Well, I suppose we haven't talked about the other characters outside of the Lambs.
True.
But we do find out from one of them that the Radham children are definitely not a
Known.
secret because people know about one of the people at the
Mustache and not
shop
mustache.
says
Who, yes, as I said
recognizes
before.
them and says they're the Radham children. So
Yeah.
that cat is out of the bag, despite that not being the
Mhm.
title of the arc anymore.
Yeah. So I want to get right back to that, but I do want to note that I pictured mustache and not mustache as like the classic henchman duo in those things. One tall and skinny, one short and round. Um,
Yes.
Entirely irrelevant to the plot here. But yeah, getting back to the fact that they're like, oh, you're the Radham children, and this isn't even in Radham. They're like miles and miles and miles away from Radham.
Hmm.
Kind of says that this is a very, very poorly kept secret.
Yes.
Like if
Exactly.
some random shopkeepers 100 miles away from Radham is like, oh yeah, you're obviously this urban legend, then it's like not so much an urban legend anymore, is it?
Yes.
And like, I do think it's the Lamb's fault. They haven't been extremely subtle at any of the arcs that we've seen. I
No,
mean,
they haven't.
they're all like jockeying for, oh, I want to be the victim. Oh, I want to be the guy that's in the front. I want to be the one who's.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's yeah. Of course, people are going to start connecting dots.
Just add them to the list of secret projects that everyone knows about, right?
Yeah, I mean, they explicitly mention to these shopkeepers, dog and catcher and the whatever. It's like
Oh, that's true. Yeah, they do that.
It's like, yeah, well, you might not, yeah, like,
Someone
well,
needs to
I'm the
give
guy
them
who
a
hangs out with this other secret project you've never heard of that everybody knows.
someone needs to give them a lesson on OPSEC, right?
Yep, definitely no top secret clearance for them in the academy.
All right. Well, now that we've done all the plot discussion and half of the character discussion, I'm not entirely sure where we are in the notes. So, do we want to talk about the other people, or do we want to talk about the
I mean,
location?
we kind of already talked about the other people.
But there was the cafe woman. Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, we did,
Yep,
and we did. Okay, we've talked all about all of our character discussion. Good job.
yeah,
Look at us
um,
being efficient.
yeah. So we can talk about just there's a few interesting, well, a little bit of interesting extra information we learn about the world here, and just like locations and monsters and whatnot.
Hmm. Yeah, I thought it was interesting the description of the coat shop
Hmm.
because it said that the store had a hardwood floor, one that had been grown from the odd way it interconnected and flowed, which I thought was just
That's
another one of
yeah.
these little details, which I thought was so fun.
Just really cool, yeah.
And it
I
also
would like
mentions that
to
it has a.
imagine.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I also like to imagine that the like said the coat racks and stuff that are mounted on the wall are also grown out of the wall.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thought. They also
Yeah,
have a stitched standing as a security guard. I don't know. It says a Stitch stood by the dressing room, a coat draped over one arm. So not
I
really a security guard, more just like an assistant for...
When I read that the first time, I assumed that meant that there was there's a customer in the dressing room, and that the Stitched was like that customer's butler Stitched, and was like holding goods, and that the person would come out at the wrong time, but that didn't happen, so I guess it is a shopkeeper Stitched.
Well,
I guess
the shopkeepers do say that Stitched, or at least that experiments need to stay outside.
That is true. That's a good point.
But I think I just glossed over entirely the fact that the Stitched was there, because he's never mentioned again. So I just just forgot about him right away.
Well, this shop is so high end. They use Stitched as mannequins.
Essentially, yeah. That way they can pose.
Yep, they can change. Like, oh yes. Yeah.
Speaking of Stitched.
We
have a 2-second Monster Corner, but I think it still deserves the song because we haven't played it in however long.
Hit it.
Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to see something strange?
Thanks to Megafire and Danny Elfant for that sound bite, which we love. Yeah.
So, we learned that Stitched are easier to make than repair, and I think this is an explicit dive into our dystopic biopunk setting here. Statement on consumerism. It's easier to just get the new version than it's easier to get the new version than get the old version repaired, which, we hear about that, like planned obsolescence and like the right to repair and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But here we're explicitly talking about it in a context where life is cheap. These are bodies, these are people, and it's just easier to get a new one than it is to put the effort to maintain what is essentially a human body.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't blame it, since probably the corpse part of it is the part that gets damaged rather than the electronic part of it.
Sure, likely. But
and the electronic part is the part that's easy to repair. So you're not going to go through diagnosing a medical issue on a dead body when you could just get a new one.
Yeah, sure, but it's still super fucked up, and it's like a statement on consumerism.
Yeah. Especially when, like, Lillian says that Stitched are so easy to make that she's made a few herself.
In, like, labs in class, yep.
Yeah. It's just like, again, you talk about life is cheap, like,
that's about as cheap as it can get, yeah.
It's like, make it yourself in your garage, like, whatever. There's also a bunch of more details on, like, maintenance of them and how you have to, like, do, like,
open it up
or just like wash it off every once in a while, keep it clean, maintain its hygiene. Like,
oh no, I read that as that was a metaphor that Lillian uses. It's like, yeah, sure, you can. Let me find that actual quote.
Sure, that was in 4.6.
I believe so. I'm looking. You can. Yeah, it's a metaphor. She's talking about like, oh, so like, could you maintain that thing without access to a lab? And she's essentially saying, yes, you could, but it's a lot of work and effort, just like you can stay clean by washing yourself with a sponge and a sink. It just takes a lot more work than if you have an actual bath.
Okay, yeah. I see what you mean. Still, I do think that, that if it's talking about, if it needs that much maintenance, I feel like a lot of people, like, if Stitched are so easy to make and so high maintenance, you almost might as well just, like, make one, use it, throw it out, make a new one. Like, every time you need one, just make
sure,
one.
But you're saying that, but these are bodies, It's not... Every Stitched is a dead person.
Yes.
Like, it's not just the ease of making one, the cost is death.
Yeah, but they keep saying flesh is cheap and dead flesh is cheaper. The whole point of that is that dead bodies are in abundance. Like, that's not the bottleneck.
No, but that it should be a bottleneck, is I guess what I'm saying.
And I suppose if you did, like, get a new Stitched every time you wanted a Stitched, then it would be it might run out of supply there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you came up with a note about the headsman.
Yeah, well, first, I think Sai is the only one who ever refers to him as the headsman.
I mean, he's the only one who wants to use the headsman.
Yeah.
Gordon keeps shooting it down.
I think, Gordon shoots it down, but I think in the past, Sai has named them, and browbeaten everyone else into accepting it as a name, and he has not yet managed to make that happen with the headsman.
True.
And as a note, I kind of appreciate the pun of the headsman, in that a headsman is historically the executioner, so Genevieve Frey's like goon, going around doing things for her, potentially killing and
she's
setting fires.
She's the judge and he's her executioner.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
And of course, he's also a head on a body.
Yes.
More so than the rest of us are.
Yes. I have a kitten on my head.
I see the kitten on your head.
This is Ristretto. We call her Stret. She's a black cat, and she's adorable.
She's adorable. She's clinging to you.
She's the smart one.
Because she's clinging to you?
No, she just is the smart one. Some of them are really dumb.
Really? Yeah. Are they just dumb or playful?
No, they're playful and dumb. She's playful and smart.
Okay. Figures things out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we put out a toy for them to play with, and some of them are like, what is this? What is this? Sniffing at it, she just comes right over and knows exactly what to do with it.
Gotcha. That's cute.
Yeah, I like her. So...
Is she going to be a foster fail?
No, we have so many cats of our own that we don't have room for foster fails, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
Yes. There have been a couple that we would have foster failed if we...
Yeah, if you had the room.
Yeah. I think out of this bunch, if we were going to foster fail, it would be the mom, because she's just so sweet and good.
Oh, fair enough.
But Stretty's pretty cute, too.
Mm-hmm. Right, so anything else you want to talk about in these chapters?
I think that was all we had, which I think we've gone through pretty fast, but as we said, it was a...
Yep. The only other thing I did want to mention is Sai trying to go into the hat shop, and the hat woman like, nope, get out. I'm not dealing with this.
That's true. There was the whole hat shop incident, and that was fun, but it didn't end up paying off at all. So
no, it was just funny. Like, nope.
So little boys are got a great idea. Just wait, I'll show you. It'll be awesome. He goes in like, I found a hat and I'm trying to find its owner. They're just like, no.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but even then, yeah, like the hat cheaper woman is just like, nope. Little boys are gross. Get out. You're not my customer.
She's not wrong.
All right. Nope, not at all.
All right.
Children are gross.
So, shall we do our discussion question?
Sure.
Our last discussion question was, what would be your reason for returning to the academy after running away? And I think we only got one answer. I went looking for answers. It was a while ago. And I only found one. So if we missed your answer, our apologies. Let us know. We'll read it out next time. But the answer I found was from 40i2 or 40i2, who says, this is a difficult one. As fascinating Twig setting is to read about, I find it the bleakest of all Wildbow's works. I wonder if that's still true.
I feel like Claw may have taken that.
Yeah, Seek is pretty bleak too. So far.
No, I'm choosing to believe that Seek is going to be optimistic eventually.
Okay. Anyway, they continue, and that's really saying something. So I would be really tempted to, let's just put it this way, to take another way out before returning to the academy. If I had to find a reason, then it would be in hope of learning something that could make the next escape attempt more successful.
Thank you for that answer.
So that's interesting. That's a pretty hardcore answer of just like, no, I wouldn't.
Yep.
And honestly, I don't blame them. That's a solid rationale.
Yeah. All right, so we have our new discussion question. Would you rather Twig-style body mods or Seek-style body mods?
So I think you'll have to elaborate on what Seek-style body mods are. And
it's more
we're gonna
classic.
Say, like, if you're super stringent about spoilers, then Seek spoiler. But like, we're still on Arc 0, so like,
Seek-style body mods are more classic cybernetic implants to an extreme, versus Twig, which are all biological.
Yeah, so it's kind
distinction
of
is wet or cyber.
Wet or cyber, and they're both extreme, right? It's like total extreme body makeover modification.
Yeah.
Just like built or
in
grown,
a computer,
essentially.
Or into a,
excellent
Twiggy style one. Cool.
I want to see lots of answers to this, or else I will only have a few answers to read next time.
Terrible. All right, Dante, so before we get on to, do you want to do our Seek segment here, or do you want to do it at the end?
Let's do it at the end.
Okay, cool. So, have you been reading anything recently?
I've been reading this biopunk serial, sort of based on an idea from a novel by Mary Shelley. It's
Okay.
by a local author. You may have heard of them. Uh, they're from Ottawa, although they currently live elsewhere in Canada. They have readers all over the world. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm assuming you're not saying Seek here.
I was hoping you'd say you're not talking about Twig, are you?
Oh.
I am, of course, talking about Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood.
Ah.
Have you read Oryx and Crake?
I have not. I don't think I've read any Margaret Atwood. I've been meaning to, but I haven't yet.
I hadn't until reading Oryx and Crake, which is kind of ironic given how much I talk about like reading local authors, and she's like the most famous author from Ottawa.
I mean, there's also I don't remember. Didn't have that answer quickly on the tip of my finger. The author of Yarrow,
Charles Lint. I don't think he's anywhere near as famous as Margaret Atwood.
No, not at all. Sorry, Charles Lint, if you're listening. Don't mean to insult you there.
Can you imagine if Charles Lint was listening to our podcast? That'd be awesome. Yeah, I don't know. So, like, The Handmaid's Tale is just so incredibly bleak that it kind of made me hesitant to read anything of hers. But
this is less so?
As I tried to convey in that introduction to it, it is so Twig-like in its essence.
Sure.
Not in its content, but in its essence that I kind of had to read it eventually. And I really enjoyed it. I think it was really good. Worth the read. Not like Twig at all.
Which is not worth the read, is what you're saying?
You think it's not worth the read if it's nothing like Twig?
Well, no, you said it's well worth the read. It's not like Twig, well worth the read, or whatever. The way you phrased it made it sound like you were...
It is well worth the read. It is very, very different from Twig. Those are not related. It's not actually based on something by Mary Shelley. It's just like loosely references her novel The Last Man, which I had never heard of, but which I'm currently reading. It's all right. It's slow, which is pretty normal for books of that time.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Oryx and Crake, good book. Do recommend.
Cool.
It has 2 sequels, which means I can call it a serialized work.
Sure.
Which I haven't read yet, but I will be reading. How about you? What have you been reading?
Not a huge amount recently. I recently read through another web serial called The Last Angel by Proximal Flame, and the basic premise of that is that the protagonist is the AI core of a warship built by humanity, the humanity was losing a genocidal war against this alien empire, and this is 2,000-3,000 years later after humanity has lost the war and mostly been eradicated, and this AI ship fighting this long lost war forever.
Interesting.
It's interesting. It's really interesting as a premise and as a book. As the story goes on, it gets deeper and deeper into kind of like, I'm losing my words here, but sci-fi. There's a lot of like the similar vibe of sci-fi eldritchy body horror stuff that we as Wildbow readers are familiar with. It's different, but it has a similar feel in some ways.
Like a space opera type thing?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it completed?
The first 2 books are completed.
Okay.
The 3rd book is ongoing, and these are big.
What's it called again?
The Last Angel.
The Last Angel. Sounds interesting.
The author is Proximal Flame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will check it out if there is an audiobook version of it.
I don't know if there is. But yeah, I've been enjoying it.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever read Ancillary Justice or its sequels?
The name is familiar, but I don't know offhand. I need to go read it, the summary real quick, just to see. I think so.
Yeah, some of your description of The Last Angel kind of reminded me of that, so...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, and I did describe it, like, she's fighting this eternal war against thing. It's not like... There is definitely a lot of action, but it's not like a mill sci-fi type of thing. It's. I mean, I'm not generally a fan of that kind of thing where it's just like, oh, numbers and
just like
bigatons and
space tactics.
Yeah. Like there's definitely some of that, and it is pretty cool that it does deal with like you fire a missile 15 hours before the thing actually gets to where and you have to sort of anticipate where things are going to be,
Right.
but your enemy also is operating at the speed of light, so doesn't have to, has to figure out, there's all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting work.
Yeah, that does sound interesting.
All right, anything else?
Yeah, no. Let's wrap this up.
All right, everybody, thank you for listening. We hope you continue along with us. This is Trip into Twig, which you can read along with us at twigserial.wordpress.com. And if you do, or even if you don't, please go to Wildbow's Patreon at www.patreon.com/wildbow and support him. It's how he can keep going into Seek.
Yeah.
Please leave your answers to our discussion question in our Reddit thread or in our thread in the Doof server.
Yeah, you can reach us at totwigpodcast@gmail.com, totwigpodcast on the platform formerly known as Twitter, our Reddit thread in r/parahumans, our discussion thread in the Doof Discord. Kind thanks to them, as always, for letting us squat in their Discord server. Next episode, we will be covering Stitch in Time 4.7 and 4.8. And now it is time for... Nope, it's not our Back to Seek section. It is our Biofact section. I could have sworn we had talked about this Biofact before. I have a distinct memory of it, but...
I don't remember this fact at all.
If you don't remember it, it's not in the notes. I'll just assume that I made it up. But I didn't make up the fact. The fact is real. It is that bees are electrically charged. Did you know that?
Cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. So apparently we've known this since like the 60s. Comes from the friction they receive from flying. I think they were talking specifically about bumblebees. Also happens with honeybees. Probably happens with other types of bees too. Sorry, it looks like you're about to say something.
When you say friction while flying, is it like the vibration of their wings and like the friction of their wings, or is it them against the air?
From what I understood, I learned this from a podcast called Let's Learn Everything. And the way they described it, it was from friction with the air and like particles in the air.
Cool.
I looked at a different source that seemed to suggest that we're not entirely sure how it happens. I guess a lot of insects get electrically charged from friction walking on the ground.
Okay.
But bees are kind of interesting that they get this charge from flying, and so whether it's actually from friction with air particles or their wings or some other reason, or as usual, probably a combination of all. Mm-hmm. Apparently they pick up about 120 picocoulombs of electrical charge. I have no idea how much that is, but apparently it's about 1/1000th of what there is in a lightning strike.
Okay.
Which, again, is probably not a meaningful number. Anyway.
So Taylor never learned this and never weaponized this, but she could have.
She should have. There was one team of scientists in Bristol that's been studying this, and they released their findings a few times over the last decade or two. They discovered that the electrical charge does help pollen to stick to them.
Okay.
So instead of having to rub directly on the pollen, it kind of like clumps to them. Pollen gets a negative charge from being connected to the earth, and bees get a positive charge from flying, so that works out well. But also, it helps them communicate with the flowers.
Interesting.
So the flowers have this negative charge, which causes the hairs on the bee to move, to bend slightly, which the bee can detect. And then it says, aha, there is a flower there. And it can also tell, if the flower is not as negatively charged as usual, that there has been a bee there recently. And so there won't be as much nectar for it to get. So it knows to deprioritize that. They can detect this from as far as 55 centimeters away. Not only does this electric charge allow the bees to detect the flowers, it also lets the flowers detect the bees. And some flowers, when they detect the electrical field of the bees, start to emit more scent, because they don't have an infinite supply of scent. So they save it for when there's a bee around, they detect its electrical field and emit more scent.
Hey, come over here.
Yeah. So that's who really knew that there was this whole electronic communication between bees and flowers going on this whole time?
Yeah, that's insane. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that fact.
That's a great fact. I really like that
It
a
is.
lot.
It is a cool fact.
Yeah, so bees are awesome. Learning about bees is awesome. I'm pretty sure they were specifically studying bumblebees and honeybees. I don't know if this is true of other bees, but it probably is. Oh, I did learn bumblebees detect the electrical field from flowers by the way it bends the hairs on their abdomens. Honeybees detect them by the way it bends the joints in their antenna.
Oh, very different.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yay for bees. Save the bees.
Speaking of that, I read that within the past 5 years in the U.S., private beekeepers, like amateur beekeepers, have reversed almost entirely the trend of bees disappearing.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're like it's like this big accomplishment.
That's awesome.
I realized that as I said that, it sounded sarcastic. I did not mean that sarcastically at all. It is a huge accomplishment, but like these are like entirely an amateur type thing. I mean, I'm saying this from a half-remembered article I read like 2-3 days ago. So,
as a counterpoint, something that I've heard is that amateur people who set up beehives with honeybees to try and save the bees are actually doing more damage than good because the honeybees they introduce are in competition with the native mason bees and carpenter bees and other native species who are the ones who are actually in trouble.
Interesting.
So if you want to introduce bees into an environment, like do your research and get the right kind of bees, because honeybees are not the only kind of bees that
in North America, honeybees are in theory invasive. I think honeybees are European.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't think they're invasive, or they wouldn't let people keep them.
Well, I mean, invasive is a nebulous term biologically, from what I understand.
Yeah, I think that different authorities will categorize something as invasive or not,
depending on how harmful it is.
Yeah, so I think that honeybees. I mean, I don't know. Just from what I know of like, for example, wildflowers and stuff in my garden, whether they call it non-native versus invasive.
Yeah,
I would say that I would be very surprised if honeybees were categorized as invasive
versus
while
non-native.
Still being allowed to be kept.
Sure.
Because otherwise they would be trying to eradicate them, I would imagine. Yeah. But maybe the nomenclature is different for bees than it is for plants.
I don't know.
Who knows? That's not our biology fact, so we're allowed to not know things.
Yep.
Right. Shall we do our back to see? What did you call it?
I don't know if I called it anything, but I was quickly brainstorming, seeking the literary truth, seeking the truth. I don't know. Seeking the Truth. Welcome to Seeking the Truth, this podcast by Dante and Tommy.
A podcast where we spend 30 seconds saying, seek, good.
Yeah, seek is good so far. As we said a little bit at the beginning, you read Sign. So you last weekend when we went out to the brewery, I think I had said something along the lines that it feels like Chapter 1 of Seek, or the 0.0 arc with Orion, feels like an earlier stage of the same narrative arc of Sign, or like a parallel one. That Sign does in a short story what, in theory, Orion's arc or Orion's story will do longer term.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned, or we kind of discussed how, like, earlier when we talked about how much our perception of Genevieve changed after knowing that she was in Boyle.
Well, yours especially.
Mine especially, because I had read it before. I had read that part of Twig, and then Boyle, and then Twig again, with a completely different perspective, influenced by having read Boyle. And so I was kind of thinking, well, if the fandom at large had, or may have had, the experience of reading Boyle before reading Twig, then their understanding of the story as it came out would be different. So in this case, if a lot of the fandom has read Sign before reading Seek, then their understanding of the story may be different, and it might be worth reading Sign in order to get that perspective.
Assuming Sign, assuming Sign actually plays into it in any way beyond being a proof of concept.
Exactly. Which we'll find out if and when Wildbow says so, essentially.
Yeah. Whether through text or through...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that first section, I said before that I found it kind of confusing at first before I realized what was going on. But like, I really, like, it was good. It was interesting. It was really crazy and spooky and all that.
Yeah.
But it was the other ones that I really liked a lot more. Like, I really liked the section 2, just like the setting of like being from the perspective of an onboard computer
I agree.
and just seeing that sort of ordinary day-to-day life of people in this imaginary future.
Yeah, not to diminish the first chapter at all, but that feels like the opening of a horror story, like a survival horror story, sci-fi horror story, whereas the others, and I'm sure it's going to move along in different ways, but it feels like the others are talking about society and our society in a more, I don't know if direct way, but like, yeah, it's a, what really, to sort of segue into one of the things that really struck me during especially the second chapter, um, is, not to sound like a Luddite, but it
But
felt
technology
very,
bad.
in a way, felt very uncomfortable, the idea of this AI being part of A's growth from childhood. Um, for a number of different reasons. Um, the biggest one of which is that it feels like the extension of an iPad child, like to the worst things. Where the idea that giving a young child an iPad is really bad for development, generally speaking, um, because it doesn't allow, like, like children develop attention disorders and all that, and the immediate response, and feeding the algorithm and all that kind of stuff, where you never people don't learn, or children don't learn the ability to be bored and how to process boredom and that kind of thing. And I think, having this onboard AI that can generate everything and anything that she wants at any given moment feels like it's pulling into that at
Sure.
the most extreme. And like, sure, we also learn that uh, Basil's highest priority is, or highest loyalty is, to the well-being of the child and to the family, and loyalty to the family. But if we look at tech companies now, that doesn't leave the best impression for these future tech companies either. It's like, sure, but like, how do you interpret that innate loyalty to the thing? Is like, oh, providing them with the best products that we have versus, and
Yeah.
I don't know, like, none of these are notes, so these are like thoughts that are coming out of me as I'm
Sure. And like, honestly, that's kind of more my perspective. Like, you're coming at your original big thought was about like the children's development.
Yeah.
For me, looking at it, it's about like the trustworthiness of the technology and the intentions of the actors. Like, I see it as like any piece of technology has its strengths and its weaknesses.
Yeah.
And if you insert it into a human being, then you're introducing those strengths and weaknesses into a human being.
Yeah.
Like, you hear of stories of malicious actors hacking into cars and causing them to malfunction. Can you imagine them hacking into your person, right? And you're relying on, like,
this
obviously
tech
this is fiction, but you are relying on the company that designed Basil to protect you from malicious actors being able to exploit this new introduction.
And for all we know, hypothesizing about the future of Seek, the cognitive robots that like cause, you can't look at the head because it reprograms, like, might well just be reprogramming the onboards in people to cause problems.
Yeah.
As you said, that might, we don't know what's causing the problems there, but that might well be the issue.
Yeah. And like, the other thing that you mentioned is the second thing that comes to mind for me is the trustworthiness of the company itself. Like, it does say explicitly that Basil's top priority is to the client, to A.
For now.
And it does say for now, doesn't it?
It does.
Top priority is to the client, and secondary priority is to the company. But I would expect that any company that has that provides that kind of equipment will be mining that for information about you constantly and exploiting that.
I mean,
that's what
exactly,
they do
like,
with
that's what they
stuff
do.
on
Exactly.
your phones. It's why I do not use TikTok, even though I probably would enjoy it if I trusted it at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel very uncomfortable about the idea of such a thing existing.
For sure.
And I think that in the context of this story, it seems benevolent, and it looks like Basil is benevolent, and if so, I'm just like extremely grateful, because that kind of thing is very concerning when, you know,
it leads to some uncomfortable
it really
ideas.
does.
And
It really
yeah,
does.
yeah.
But I like Basil. He's
Sure.
got a personality too, which is really fun.
Absolutely.
He's a great character.
Absolutely, but still.
But still.
Caveats.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean,
yeah, those are my thoughts on Zeke so far.
Yeah.
Good, really good, exceptional, really looking forward to more of it, and especially liking the Basil section, although I don't trust the technology.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't necessarily, but yeah, speaking of the whole parent thing, and I did not like reading the scene where the child was upgraded in the 3rd chapter.
Oh yeah, I actually thought of you when I was reading that. I'm like, ooh, this must be giving Tommy a a hard time.
Like, nope, don't like this. But I saw someone pulled out in one of the reasons that that it's done so young, that those upgrades, and Wildbow, I think, brought it up, or not brought it up, but like acknowledged, or that was a kind of the intention, or at least a part of the intention, is that children adapt to those kinds of things better than adults do.
Yeah,
you know, hearing aids.
That is, I think, mentioned in text, where he's like, if we do it now.
Oh, was it?
Well, it's just like the sales guy is like, if we do it now, then like the capabilities of it will be very high because they'll adapt well. If we you can save it for later if you want, but the results won't be as good. Essentially, which honestly is what you'd expect.
Yeah, and the last thing I do want to mention is I thought it was interesting, and I've seen other people bring this point up on Reddit, and I think on the Discord also, that each of these chapters is a birth in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
Ryan
is emerging from
technically 4 births.
Yep, absolutely.
Because A and Basil both get born in the
same time. Yep.
Chapter. Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
It's a good place to start.
It's a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see where we go from here.
I'm really excited. I'm really enjoying it.
Me too.
Yeah. So this has been
Seeking the Truth or something.
Yeah. Hopefully someone actually does a real podcast about it, because we can't actually do 2 podcasts at once. We don't have the bandwidth for that, but would love to have those discussions. But in the meantime, we've got 2 chapters to read before our we record again.
Next episode.
Yeah, we will talk to you later.
See y'all.
Bye.
Or the other day, no, it was a week ago, a kimchi beer.
Interesting.
It was interesting.
Is that the one you were talking about at Shiloh?
Oh, maybe. I don't remember if it was before Shiloh. If it's ringing bells, then I have definitely talked about it with you at some point.
You definitely mentioned some weird beer combination that you had tried.
Yeah, it was interesting. I went back and got more so that Laura could try it. I would say yes, once you get past the idea that you're trying to drink a beer and you take it for like at its own value. You know, you have a beer. Overall, you have a general idea of what you're expecting when you're going to drink a beer, right?
Right.
This was not that at all.
It does not taste like beer. It's like drinking a something else.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you approach it without thinking, "Oh, this is a beer," despite being a beer, it was pleasant.
Interesting.
It was like a savory drink, like an appetizer beer.
I'm putting my camera close to where your picture is so that I can look at you.
Okay, sounds good. Because, it really makes eye contact with our audience, right?
Yeah. This is a video format, right? We're releasing this. All right.
All right, let's get going.